Well, hello everyone. It's 5 o'clock in Washington, D.C., and thank you for joining us at the International Mountmakers Forum 2020. I'm Emily Kaplan. I'm an objects conservator at Smithsonian NMAI, and I believe I'm the #1 fan of Mountmakers and always have been, but there's a lot of competition for that. So I think conservators learn more from Mountmakers than from anybody else. So just a little housekeeping here. Please note that your microphones will be muted and your cameras turned off during the presentations. And this is so that because we're recording all the presentations to eventually post to the fabulous IMF YouTube channel. So we want the audio quality to be as good as possible. And we're also live streaming on YouTube at the IMF's channel. Check the chat, but this information I'm gonna run by you right now is also in the chat. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A function on Zoom. And if you have a question for a specific person, please use their name so that we know it's directed to them. We'll try to address as many questions as possible as we can at the end of each presentation, but any questions we don't get to, and there are so many, can be brought up during the after parties or through the Slack app, and the links for those are in the chat. And also feel free to contact the presenters directly. All of their abstracts and bios are on the IMF's website. Again, the link is in the chat. So it's now time for our next speaker, Ian Hart, Natural History Exhibit Preparator, San Francisco, California, US of A, who is presenting A Clear View from Above, Viewtop Jar Lids for the exhibition of fluid preserved specimens.
I'm here to talk about a device for getting a better look at what lies underneath the surface. Maybe it's a good metaphor or an emblem for conferences like this, or maybe it just is what it is. Fluid preserved specimens are an important part of natural history collections and exhibitions. Glass containers are preferred for both collection storage and display because of their clarity, and because glass containers, unlike clear plastic ones, are not dissolved by common preservative fluids like alcohol. It's a good thing this jar is made of glass. The acrylic block propping up the fish inside of it dissolved, but that's another story. Most common types of jar found in museum collections, those with opaque screw-top lids or with ground glass stoppers, don't afford good views through their tops, limiting viewing angles for exhibition. Table cases, in which most objects are seen from above, are a particularly challenging exhibition situation for fluid-preserved specimens. Flat plate glass can be used to make a translucent lid that affords the possibility of a top view into the container. However, condensation, drips, and ripples in the fluid surface will often spoil the view from above. From the side, those same drips and ripples can create confusing shadows and bright spots on a specimen that is otherwise clearly visible. The speckles on this shark are created by light shining through the drips on the underside of the lid. Here is the same specimen under even illumination. Immersion of the interior surface of the container solves the problems of condensation and ripples interfering with light transmission, just like a snow globe. But lid immersion interferes with jar sealing, and it eliminates important headspace for thermal expansion or contraction. The Viewtop lid, developed at the California Academy of Sciences for the presentation of fluid-preserved specimens in the 2019 exhibition, Skin, Living Armor, Evolving Identity, solves these problems by incorporating glass construction, an air gap, and lid immersion. Custom fabrication by a glass artisan is necessary, but for the modestly sized containers depicted here, the work is relatively inexpensive and within the basic capability of a scientific glass shop. The bottom of the Viewtop lid, shown facing up here, has a shoulder or rabbet. The top of the lid is flat. The system consists of a base jar and the lid. This particular lid was made to fit a base jar that we already had on hand. Here, the lid and base are assembled. This cross-section diagram shows the basic construction details of the Viewtop lid system. The rabbet or shoulder in the lid creates head space large enough to allow the bottom face of the lid to contact the liquid preservative while preventing seal fluid contact. Fluid contact with the bottom of the lid prevents drips and ripples from interfering with the view. A fill hole allows fluid to be added after the lid is sealed. The void space in the lid allows it to be welded from commercially available borosilicate tube and plate. A vacuum relief hole is a fabrication artifact. It prevents dangerous negative pressure from developing in the void space after it's welded. It can be filled with silicone as soon as you get your work home from the shop, before any dust can get in and spoil the view. My communications with the glass shop are shown here. The shop was happy to work from hand-drawn sketches, email descriptions, and conversations on the phone, which were important. I originally proposed a solid glass lid, its shoulder or rabbet, to be machined from a thick plate of glass. We talked about it on the phone, and the fabricator countered with the hollow design presented in the previous slides, which was far less costly to make. Borosilicate vessels are typically worked on lathes, so the capacity of the lathe in your fabricator's shop will also be an important factor in what size containers you can commission. This video shows a disc being fused to a tube to make a jar bottom. Here is a diagram of the components of the Viewtop container system. These parts will be welded together to make a base jar and the lid. When developing dimensions for a container, it's a good idea to take a look at the tubing sizes offered by borosilicate glass manufacturers and talk to your fabricator about what sizes of tubes and discs they stock. The filling procedure begins when the specimen is mounted and placed in the container. Enough preservative fluid is added to the container to keep the specimen covered. Silicone is then applied to the clean rim of the jar, but the filling hole is left open. When the rim seal cures, the fluid level is topped off through the filling hole to bring it up past the bottom of the lid, but not far enough to choke the headspace or contact the seal. I'm using a large syringe and a needle with a blunt tip. These images show a meniscus forming where the fluid has started to contact the bottom of the lid. Once that disappears, filling is finished. The fill hole is then sealed and allowed to cure. Now the container can be installed. Unfortunately, silicone is vapor permeable. Some alcohol and water will pass through it. The preservative fluid has lost contact with the bottom of the lid in this picture. It needs topping up in order to prevent the meniscus from wandering and interrupting the view of the fish below. The jar can be topped off by adding preservative with a syringe and a sharp needle pushed through the silicone-sealed filling hole. Here is a close-up. You may have already noticed that this particular lid doesn't look like the glass example I showed earlier. I made it from acrylic in our wood shop. The glass shop we worked with declined to fabricate a rectangular version of the design I presented here. Most glass shops will only weld containers that can be put on a lathe. It is very hard to find a glass shop that will weld rectangular containers, like the jar base in this picture. And if you can find one, the work will be very expensive. In case you were concerned about this lid dissolving, I'm glad to let you know that the boxfish was transferred back to its all-glass storage container after the 6-month run of this show. I'd like to end this talk with some suggestions for further experimentation should any of you decide to try this at home. Since preservative was lost through the seals of these jars, I'd like to suggest some possible strategies for lessening that leakage. The first is to improve jar-to-lid contact by grinding the mating surfaces flat. This could facilitate a much thinner seal, which would lessen the vapor transmissible area of it. The second strategy would be to investigate alternate sealing compounds that may have a lower vapor transmission rate. Different silicone resin chemistries and additives can be explored. Non-silicone compounds could also be tried out. This figure from NewSil, the maker of silicone resins, compares water vapor transmission rates of 9 different silicone chemistries. Thanks for your attention. If you have questions and comments, I would love to hear from you in the Q&A or via email. I'd like to acknowledge everyone who helped prepare this presentation and to thank the organizers of the Mountmakers Forum again for the opportunity to discuss this topic with you all. I'm wishing you clearer views from above in the future.
Well, that was a fantastic talk. Thank you, Ian. I've always been terrified of those jars, and that was really, really helpful. Our Q&A facilitator is Lisa Imamura. So Lisa, do you have some questions?
Yes, all right. Ian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thanks.
All right, great. So we do have a question in the Q&A. Keep them coming, folks. The question is, how often do you find yourself having to top off the fluid on exhibition? And do you have to reseal the fill hole each time?
Yeah, for this exhibition, we just did one top off, and I think it was about after maybe it was a roughly 6-month exhibition, and I can't recall exactly how long through it was, but I think it was at least 3 months. And actually that particular jar may have had some other sealing problems that contributed to the loss of fluid. So, and it also, because that was a plastic lid, it may have even absorbed some of the fluid preservative into the plastic. Not sure about that. I didn't weigh the lid before putting it on, so I couldn't tell. But the fill hole doesn't have to be resealed because it's just being pierced by this very thin needle. And so it just, we assume it, you know, it's good enough, you know, even though there's, I guess, some kind of passageway through there, it's tight enough that it doesn't need to be resealed. But with a thin needle, it does take a while to get, you know, even a few cubic centimeters of fluid in there.
All right. Actually, as kind of a follow-up question, if you were worried about it absorbing some of the fluids, does that mean it's not a reusable lid? Is that correct? Well,
you know, yeah, the plastics are they can be problematic because most preservative fluids, especially the alcohols, will dissolve the plastic, and it's just not as stable as the glass. So that's why we were trying to make these glass versions. In the case of the square lid, we just couldn't do that economically, so we went with the plastic. I think one of the themes from this show, or from this conference, that I've noticed is how, you know, sometimes mounts that you make for an exhibition have a life that goes beyond the run of the show. And in natural history museums, I think that's often the case. And so I think it's, you know, I always try to make things that will last longer than just the run of the show, because often the show stays up longer than anticipated, or it gets used for storage. So there's a danger in kind of just making things that are temporary.
Absolutely. So we have another question here. I wonder if casting a glass lid in a mold instead of welding would be an option for the rectangular forms.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a glass worker myself, so yeah, I guess there's probably you know, many different ways of fabricating things out of glass, and yeah, that could work. I know, you know, the thicker the glass is, I believe the more you'll get kind of a distortion of, you know, when the light, when it goes into a denser surface, it'll bend and then come back out, and you get this displaced image, which can sometimes be disorienting. So that could be an advantage of having these kind of thin, hollow layers in that top lid, but that would be definitely something to try. If you could make those surfaces very smooth and flat, I think the plate glass that a glass fabricator uses is very, very flat. It's float glass, you know, so it has nice optical qualities.
Sounds great. We did have a question come in about the specifics of the silicone used. Do you happen to have that on hand?
No, I don't. I think in this case, it was just a General Electric type. It was either type 1 or 2. I think, yeah, you know, I always get mixed up in that and have to refer to it. I've used other kinds of silicone, and certainly you could mix up your own and stuff that in a tube and use it too. Yeah, one of the types gives off acetic acid as it cures, I believe, and the other, I don't know what it does. So that's something to think about. Anyway.
For sure. So there is a question here. Did you talk to any aquarium makers when seeking the rectangular jar?
Yeah, most aquaria are glued together, and that's problematic with alcohol. Alcohol will dissolve. It'll dissolve things. I actually had a project where he made some square glass containers with an adhesive that the fabricator said, oh yeah, this is you know, alcohol safe, and they gave me some data that said, you know, there was no decrease in bond strength. I think it was a cyanoacrylate, like a UV cure cyanoacrylate adhesive, and about a week after I'd put the specimens in the jars, the adhesive softened and came in the next morning, and the jars were, you know, half full of alcohol, and the rest had run out. They hadn't been installed yet, so they had run out into a secondary containment. But it was that's when we went with the welded glass.
Fair enough. I'm glad that you found that out before it was installed, because that could have been a mess, right?
Yeah, it was bad enough as it was.
Oh my gosh, so this is Emily again. That was fantastic, Ian. Thank you so much. Great questions. Yeah, cyanoacrylate, I don't know. So we need to move on to our next presenters, Sebastian, Denise, Niha, Velagapudi and Emily Fryer of the Canterbury Museum in Christchurch, New Zealand. And all of these talks have such awesome titles, I just have to say. They're presenting You Can Stick It, tips on the use of Lascaux 303 for temporarily securing museum objects on display. You're on.
Hi, welcome to the Canterbury Museum, Christchurch, New Zealand. My name's Sebastian, I'm part of the exhibitions team here, and
I'm Niha, and I'm a conservation and collections technician.
Hi, I'm Emily, and I'm a conservator. Today we're going to present our paper, which is on You Can Stick It, and we're going to talk about tips and tricks for using Lascaux 303 to temporarily adhere objects while on display. Have you ever needed to just stick an object in place, but be able to remove the adhesive later on? Our talk today will demonstrate creating and applying the dots used to form a temporary adhesive in direct contact with an object. Previously, Canterbury Museum used Roplex. However, since its discontinuation, we've been testing Lascaux 303 as a replacement. Its properties prior to drying are slightly different, so hopefully this talk will give you the options to make a perfect dot.
here in our gallery of European decorative arts, removable adhesives are used extensively to protect our treasures from damage. As they retain a slight jelly consistency, they are also very good at reducing vibration experienced by objects. When top-heavy objects are to be displayed on fabric bases and pinning is not possible, we use small acrylic bases to increase the footprint of the object. We use them extensively to hold glass, metal, including silver, and glazed ceramic objects. It adheres well to glass, acrylic, metal, or painted shelves or surfaces. We also use it to secure mounts to shelves like acrylic plate stands or object lifts. One of the things our researchers have found it very useful for is temporarily fixing bones or other objects down to scanning plates for our 3D scanner.
This is Lascaux 303 HV. It's used in conservation when an adhesive with permanent tackiness is required. When you start making your dots, you would either want to use a syringe without a needle attached or a bamboo skewer. It's also quite useful to create some dot templates to get a consistent size. We use non-stick baking because it dries a lot quicker. So Lascaux is quite viscous, so it does tend to take a little bit of pressure to get it out of the syringe. But I'm just making the dots according to the templates underneath. I'm trying to keep it within that dot. So another way of applying is with a bamboo skewer. You can use the pointy end or the blunt end. So to remove the peaks and to slightly flatten the dots, we apply a baking paper sheet over the top for them to dry with. So after 24 hours of curing, the dots should be ready for use. You can peel the baking paper away to get access. The least contaminating method of application is to use the baking sheet itself to apply the dot to your object. To make this easier, you can cut up your sheets into more manageable sections. To apply the dot, just apply a little bit of pressure. Another method is to use the bamboo skewer to apply to the surface.
So how do we know that Lascaux will be suitable for object restraint in an earthquake environment? One of the tests we do, which is very simple, is a tilt table test. So we take our object, we attach it to a table, and we lift it up until the object falls off. Preferably use a stunt object. So in placing your object onto display, locate it where you want it, press it down, and give it a gentle twist to lock the adhesive down. If you have to pick it up, you will have to replace the adhesive, so try and get it right first time. As a simple test for its earthquake effectiveness, we find that if it can support its own weight to 90 degrees, generally it would support itself in an earthquake. So when it comes to removing the object, either you can gently twist to release the adhesive, or if you feel like that's not going to work, get some fine thread or nylon, and you can use it to slowly break the seal and release the object. So to remove it off any glass, metal, or glazed ceramic surface, it should just roll off and not leave any residue behind. Thus far, we've tested removability up to 6 months, so it's definitely suitable for temporary exhibition display. Other testing is ongoing.
Although tilt tables are an easily accessible test method, our results with creating a more real-life earthquake has given us greater insight into how the adhesive dots respond against other methods and materials, shown here shaken to 110% of New Zealand's building code. We are looking forward to extending this research with the University of Canterbury to provide more detailed recommendations of what is required for different sizes and weights. We are also exploring how the dots respond with age, as our results so far show that they are harder to remove after 6 months on display.
We hope that has been helpful and informative for you. Thanks for watching.
Boy, thanks, guys. That was fantastic. I bet we're going to have a lot of really good questions. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa Imamura, who is our Q&A master at this moment.
All right, can you hear me? All right, Laura, thank you. Just wanted to thank you for sharing this project. I think we all know how frustrating it is when things get discontinued. So I'm glad that you're able to explore alternatives and having success at it. So go ahead and launch into the Q&A here. Well, someone says, did you say they discontinued Roplex? Glad I bought 2 gallons. And, when did that happen? Do you know?
It was 2012, actually. Yeah.
Oh, so right after the earthquake, basically.
Yeah, yep.
2012. So I guess folks who have stocked up have a little bit of a reprieve. Okay, so next question. What is the longest you have left it on an object in your test?
At the moment, about 6 months.
Yes, 6 months. We've got some that we've done to a year, but those aren't across the board. So we tested on a number of different substrates. So we don't have a year's testing across the board, but for some items we have a year. And depending on the different substrates, it does slightly change how it reacts.
Got it. Next question. What is the, oops, sorry, I already got that one. How well does it adhere to frosted type glass surfaces?
Very well. It seems to. The gel consistency of it really likes to key into both semi-porous, which is like frosted glass, and non-porous surfaces. So thus far, yeah, it seems to have a bit more of a problem than Roplex with very dusty surfaces. So some slightly friable earthenware or terracotta, if it's got that slightly dusty feeling, particularly on the base of a ring, but otherwise it seems to be doing quite well.
Yeah, because it doesn't penetrate into the object. The surface that it adheres to needs to not be friable or have any kind of loose material on it. Otherwise, it would need to be pre-consolidated with something like paraloid first. So you could use that if that was acceptable to the object in order to create that surface. But obviously, because it's not penetrating into the object, it's just sitting on it, it'll just detach. If there's anything friable, that'll come off first.
Great, so kind of related, we have a question about how Lascaux compares to like sticky wax or, to earthquake wax, if you've tried that, particularly for porous materials.
Yeah, so our test results, you saw some of the shake table testing. So our main bulk of the testing was related to comparing the wax, which is sort of quake wax or museum wax. There's a number of different titles for it, which is basically a microcrystalline based wax. There are different types of waxes, so it's you've got to be a bit careful about which type of wax it actually is. But what our actual thing was to look about that and to look at how Roplex and Lascaux related to the waxes and whether they were comparable across the board. Lascaux actually compares really well to those microcrystalline waxes. We found, as I'm sure anyone who's used museum wax, that it's really horrible to use because it basically gets on everything, and it's really hard to find. You make the balls and then you basically end up with a really sticky residue on absolutely everything that it touches. So one of our ways was to try and mitigate and to look at that and to look at how they compare. One thing to really note is that the waxes don't change that much over time, whereas the adhesives probably will. So that's part of our longitudinal testing, which is the future.
Oh yeah, that's an important note there, yeah. There is a question specifically about dental wax, and if you have results with that or experience with that as compared to, something that's marketed as a quake wax or a museum wax.
Yeah, the dental wax is actually a different composition, and you need to heat that in order to get it to adhere to your object. So it's something that you're only going to try on something. Papa did some great studies on using it on some large Anne Robertson glass pieces, which are really stable, really, good substrate to deal with, no breaks, no things like that. So where you can heat your object, not very common, but where you can do that, then it's certainly an option, and the results are quite good. But it's not something that we tested because for the majority of the pieces that we're dealing with, they're very delicate and they're also not going to be able to be heated.
All right, thank you. We have a question here. Do you have a chart of what other materials you've tested? And I guess, well, returning to the museum wax, I think we've kind of addressed that, but in terms of how you kept track of your results and where we might find them.
We're publishing, Niha,
yes, so we are hoping to publish this year, well, hopefully in AIC journal. So once we have submitted our paper, it should be available for everyone. But yes, we do have charts of all the materials that we've tested on and all the material adhesives and things that we did test.
And the different levels to which we tested, so the different, the shake levels, so which ones would do better at lower shakes versus higher shakes, and comparing and contrasting the different two methods, so the one where you tip it to 90 degrees or different degrees, and then also putting it on a shake table. So that will kind of come out in the paper, and so all that will be detailed. But we've had so many questions from people asking us, how do you even apply this? That we thought that it was quite useful to do something focused on applying it practical way.
Very practical. I appreciate that. Yeah, it looked, in comparison, like you were saying, to working with museum wax, it's like, oh, and then just put the paper down and peel it off. It looks amazing. So, although I'm sure it takes some practice. We have a question here about what type of deck materials you tested it with. Will that be included in this fantastic chart?
Yes, it will be. So mainly the types of surfaces we do are fabric covered surfaces, painted MDF or other painted material surfaces, and glass or acrylic. Now, functionally glass and acrylic are effectively the same, so we just used acrylic. So those are the main decking materials that we would have inside our display cases. And yeah, so those are the ones we tested with.
Great. There's a question here about how well it works with wood, and it sounds like if you've been using it on MDF, then it does work with wood, but I think this question might be about wood objects. and if it's easily removed from wood.
Yeah, and this is one of our particular concerns because obviously we have a number of tables within the museum where, and especially in a new exhibition that we're working on, where people want to put objects directly on the table as though you're laying up a beautiful table, National Trust style. And obviously for us here, it's a big risk of earthquakes. So we can't obviously fix to the table because the table is often a collection item itself, and they're often varnished. Or French polished. So actually one of the really key things that we were looking at is whether we were getting any staining. And obviously if anyone's used quake wax, you'll know that it completely stains horribly any surface that it touches. So that really wasn't an option. We used it at the art gallery for an exhibition, a more modern table. And that over quite a short display of 3 months, we didn't get any staining on the table. But again, that's quite a just short display period. So trying to do those longitudinal studies will help quite a lot with that. But I certainly think, if your option is the object, especially if you're talking about glass object, if the option is no securing here, that's just not an option. So being able to actually use it on wood surfaces is certainly a lot more removable and a lot almost no staining that we could see on our one from using it on a polished surface. But that's not to say that I wouldn't suggest that you would test it first, because and especially over a longer period, that may not be the case.
All right. There's a question here. If you've experimented with adding water to thin the adhesive out to get thinner dots or less tacky dots, how does it mix with other things?
We've mixed with the 498. So actually we did create a number of different percentages with 360 and 303, which is the replacement for 360, and then also 498. And to give different levels of tack, because the 498 doesn't stay permanently tacky, but the two are you can mix the two to create different kinds of variations in tack. We found that anything over 10% basically wasn't tacky enough. It does make the dots stronger, so it does act as a stronger adhesive the more 498 that you put into it. But actually for a lot of our tests, basically the 303 was perfectly acceptable to a real earthquake scenario. So actually the added issues of trying to mix and making sure that your mix is a perfect mix sometimes is quite difficult, and contamination from different surfaces. So we try to keep it sort of as simple as possible, because our aim is that this is able to be used by a lot of small regional museums and by individuals. So it's quite, it's more complex. They've got to get two materials and then they've got to mix them.
We also found the colour changed slightly, didn't we?
Yeah.
So I think the higher the mix, the slightly more yellow it was. So,
yeah, a little. Yeah.
303 is not perfectly clear. Ropex was basically perfectly clear, and so it's subtly coloured. But we find that in the small quantities we're using it, you saw some of the galleries there of glasses on glass shells, and you really don't notice the discoloration there. It's only when you get a large amount of it that you get a very slight perceived yellow.
So if you're making plate bases, so for like heavier, larger objects, sometimes what we do is we basically create a sort of a full base mount, where it's quite a solid thing like a plate, something that's not broken before. So you can actually create a sort of full base mount. And in that case, actually diluting it will be better, because Ropex flows really beautifully across the surface, sometimes a bit too beautifully, whereas the Lascaux will kind of more stay where you put it. So actually having that float, so by diluting it, you will be able to get it to form more of a float. But we actually found that with the dots, the Lascaux works really well in terms of creating quite a nice, you want a little bit of a dot, a little bit of raisedness, because you've got to be able to get underneath it. And also because you want that little bit of squish. So in an earthquake, it actually does more than just acts as an adhesive. It actually sort of gives a bit of cushioning action as well. So that's really quite crucial to it. So you do want a little bit of raisedness, and actually putting the baking paper over the top just gives you that nice flat surface above and below.
Gosh, that was wonderful, you guys. Thank you so much. I know there's more questions, so everybody, you know, please do come to the after party, and the presenters' contact information is available to you. But that was just super cool. Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
So the next and final presentation is from Philip Roots, Robin Hansen, Elizabeth Saluk, and Kristen Windmuller Luna of the Cleveland Museum of Art, Cleveland, Ohio, US of A, and Renee Stein and Bruce Raper from Emory University, that's in Atlanta, Georgia, USA. And they will speak on a super topical topic, remote mount making and virtual couriering, a case study.
Hi everyone, Shelley again. And I guess it's finally time to say goodbye, but not without a few thank yous, because there were so many people who helped out to make this week possible. I want to first thank all our presenters and moderators who not only prepared and presented fabulous talks, but also took on the new technological challenges beautifully. Being willing to come and host breakout rooms at our after parties was so generous and made them so fun and so informative. Here they all are. And all the rest of the volunteers from far and wide who made this event possible in all different ways. Thank you so much. And thank you again to the entire IMF steering committee, who are also volunteers, working around their regular mount making and conservation jobs and stepping in as they could to do whatever it took to make this happen. This is a massive undertaking, and it couldn't have happened without all those long planning meetings and conversations and email chains. But I want to share specific gratitude for Richard Hards, who took on the challenge of starting us off in our Instagram world, and Pierre-Luc Brouet for taking that Instagram challenge and exploding it into the informative and fun site that it is today, and for memes. And Sam Hamilton, who despite a broken wrist, helped out every day this week, but also steadfastly and patiently set up and guided us toward the Slack app use that has deepened the experience for many of us this week. And Sam Gatley, who was an indispensable advisor for me around the Textile Days' many exciting twists and turns. And also, she was also very willing to jump in wherever help was needed. And Emmy Savacool, who was also game to work wherever help was needed and brought so much to the table every time that she did. BJ Farrar, who sent out our email blasts, kept that website's online forum flowing, and kept our AIC wiki page updated. Elizabeth Soriano, who was the rock of this committee, I think. She takes care of so many behind the scenes, thankless tasks and makes things flow so it looks effortless. She took on the huge job of content coordinator for this conference and deserves extra kudos, maybe some time off even, for that and everything else that she's done for IMF 2020. And last but not least, a big thank you to Laura McClure, who started with the committee after winning our logo competition just a few months ago, but has gone on to be indispensable through her untiring graphics efforts, YouTube knowledge, website savvy, being generally game to whatever challenge came up, and maybe most importantly, her meme making talents. Thank you all for being willing to try this out in these trying and crazy times. And I also just wanted to give a thank you to all the institutions, departments, supervisors, companies that supported this event and allowed us to take the time and resources to create it. From the Smithsonian and NMAI, I want to thank my supervisor, Marion Kamenetz, for giving me permission to take this on, the NMAI Conservation and Collections Departments for supporting this event with their time and knowledge, Becky in Events and Wendy in Intellectual Property, who gave such valuable advice, Diana in the Smithsonian's office, OCIO office, for her setup and permission and tech help in general, and last but not least, Abby, Johannes, and Alex in NMAI's IT department for their support, patience, guidance, and knowledge in all aspects of this virtual event. And finally, I have to thank my family, John and Tasha, for supporting me fully and feeding me these last few months so I could focus on all this. I'm forever grateful. But most importantly, to all of you from around the world who have defied the isolation and disconnectedness that these times can impose on us, to instead come together as global colleagues and craftspeople and have a great time, even if it has to be in 2 dimensions for now. Thank you again, and happy mount making. Hi, everybody. Shelley again. And I'm assuming you all can see me because I can't see myself. But thank you all so much for coming. This has been a great 4 days. I've learned so much, and I hope you have too. And now what I'd like to do is to bring up the other members of the IMF steering committee and see if any of you guys have any send-off words that you'd like to share with the group.
Hi. I feel really honored to have been invited to join the IMF steering committee. Over the past few months, I met so many amazing people, and my knowledge in mount making has grown like kind of a kitten on steroids. Thanks to everyone who make this event possible, and many, many thanks at all the people who attend the presentation. And after the forum, we will continue to share and encourage our trade on our social media channels. So stay tuned, everyone. We'll be back.
Pam and Earl, are you there? Sam Gatley, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah, hi. I would just like to say to everyone what a privilege it has been to be involved with such an amazing group of people that are so willing to give their time and share their expertise and knowledge and be so open about the challenges and the solutions. And just to thank everybody who has come and worked so hard, and especially thank you to you, Shelley. Yeah, cheers everyone. Till next time.
Thank you. Sam Hamilton.
Hi. I also want to say that it's been such a great privilege to be part of the conference steering committee. Thank you to the committee members and of course all the volunteers for their incredible work. Thank you to you, Shelley, for your tireless efforts. It's been a real pleasure to work with you all. I also want to thank everyone who's shared their knowledge and their experience, and to everyone who's joined and connected through this virtual forum. I've learnt so much, and I really look forward to seeing you all again, and hopefully that's in Australia one day in the future, and not too distant future, hopefully.
And Jamie. Thank you, Sam.
Oh my, this has been amazing. I'm looking forward to more virtual as part of this whole thing because it's just proven itself to have such value. Thanks so much, Shelley, and everyone who's worked on this.
Thank you, Jamie. And David and Mayor, did you have anything you'd like to say?
Yeah. I'm so glad that we could get together and have such a good time with everybody. Tomorrow, we're back in the shop.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, wow, 4 days of creative solutions to interesting problems. And that's just on the mount making end. For me, it was a whole experience on the technical end. I don't think I knew how to spell Zoom before we started this. So now, whole new thing. Thanks to everybody for coming in and being part of, and I hope you go home with a lot of new ideas.
Thank you. And Laura, are you out there?
I'm here. I also wanted to thank everyone. I've been so honored to be a part of this wonderful virtual event. I always learn so much and love connecting with all of the people in our field. And thank you, Shelley, for all of the work that you've done to bring this together. And thank you, the world, for attending.
Thank you. And Emmy. Emmy, are you there?
Hi, everybody. I'm so very, very grateful to have gotten to be a part of this amazing event, to have gotten to meet all of you vibrant, wonderful, interesting group of makers. Thank you so much for everyone for sharing their knowledge and being so open. And yeah, I'm very excited for next time. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Elizabeth.
Hi, I want to thank everyone for attending. We wouldn't have had, we had an amazing attendance list. It was just amazing. And we couldn't have done it without all the volunteers and the presenters from around the globe. Regardless of time zones, the participation was amazing. And a very special thank you to Shelley Euler, whose enthusiasm, her vision, and her organization made this IMF happen. So thank you, Shelley.
I need to click on.
Hi, Pam and Earl.
Hey,
Hey.
We're having technical difficulties.
Welcome to Zoomland. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll have to get down here lower. I wish.
Turn that one off. We've got two computers on here now, and we're getting a feedback or something. I never knew computers did that. Just turn it off. But anyway, we wanted to both say how we think this is really not, the end of the IMF, but the beginning of a whole new internet aspect of mount making that's going to grow and continue to grow, mainly because of Shelley, I think.
Oh, no, it's because of everybody. It's going to grow. It's all of you guys.
Are they what?
Thank you guys. Thanks for your comments. Richard, are you there?
Hello. I'm not seeing myself on here, but
Oh, you're there. We can see you.
That's all.
okay. Well, as strange as it's been to not see people in person, it's great to have had 4 days of going much deeper into content and having a lot more time to spend with people. And I'm sad it's over, but looking forward to the next time. Thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work and all of your presentations. And I really learned a lot. So it's been great. Thanks.
Standing over in a stupid position and I can't.
Oh my goodness. Mark, is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I understand what it was doing over there. How did I get
We promise we didn't script this. This is too much
Okay,
fun.
sorry. I was, can you hear me
You're
now?
perfect. We can see you and hear you.
Okay, I just was going to say that in 2008, this all started with the initiative that Mac and BJ took to start the Mountmaking Forum. And who would have thought that in 2020, due to a pandemic, we'd have to be doing it virtually. And thinking about it virtually seemed like that's crazy. But it's a huge success, thanks to Shelley, Laura, Elizabeth, and everybody else who worked on it. And having seen the presentation from Cleveland, we've perhaps seen the future. We couldn't see this in the future. We couldn't see this in the future in 2008, that in 2020 there'd be a pandemic, but we've now seen what's going to be a change, I think. And I'm going on too long, but I really think this is going to change everything. And the next forum may be a hybrid, but we've already learned that in the future, couriers won't have to be at a location. It can be done remotely. So it's an amazing time. Thank you to everybody, the presenters, the attendees, and everything. And now I'll be quiet.
That's okay. We're glad to hear from you, Mark. And Mac, are you out there?
Yeah, hello everyone from Los Angeles. I'm really impressed by all the papers and all the effort that went into this. Just the international participation is mind-boggling. And I think our next challenge is, as Mark said, to create a hybrid that perpetuates the momentum that's been developed here and folds that into the physical event that we certainly hope to have 2 years from now at the Getty Center. So big shout out to Shelley, all the crew, everybody else. Thanks so much. Stay strong, stay safe.
Thank you, Mac. And last but not least, BJ.
Hey everyone, I'm going to sound completely redundant here. I'm sorry. But I have to say this has been an amazing 4 days, beyond, certainly beyond my expectations of what could be done. If this is your first IMF conference, I know I met a few people in the after parties that this was their first conference, or if this was your 7th one, we want to thank you for your participation. It makes a significant difference, and we look forward to your continued involvement, because that's what makes this group what it is. And also a huge special thanks to Shelley and all of our IMF volunteers, because without their dedication, this conference wouldn't have been a reality. So we couldn't have done it without you. So thanks everyone. And lastly, I just wanted to thank all of our presenters, because it's their willingness to share their amazing projects, techniques, and lessons learned that have such lasting benefits for all of us. And that's what this is about. It's about learning and about moving our profession forward. So I've rambled on too much here, but hey, cheers to a great conference.
Yay. And now the rest, we'll do this symbolic gesture, and everybody who's not somebody from the Getty, we're gonna disappear until the after party. We'll see you at the after party. And let you guys from the Getty kick off the next one. Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Shelley.
I'll go ahead and start off, and we hope to see as many attendees as possible in person at the Getty, but we'll definitely have a hybrid version because we know a lot of you can't attend in person. And we hope to see you in 2022.
Definitely. Yes, it was supposed to happen next month, but that isn't our reality right now. So it's been postponed. We've gotten a good solid support from the Getty that that we'll do it in 2022. So we're looking forward to developing that, and especially, as Max said, to turn this into, and Elizabeth, into a hybrid situation. I mean, clearly this is a successful format.
Yes, we do have our work cut out for us, because as BJ and I were talking the other day, I think now it's going to take 2 teams, you know, one team for the physical event and the other team for the virtual event, working together to pull this hybrid version off that's now running around all of our minds. But we're up for the game. We love
Yes, we
it.
are.
We love you guys. Please keep
Definitely.
an eye on that website. It gets better, better, better every month. People are adding to it, changing it, trying to infuse it with all the energy that's out there. So hang tough. We look forward to seeing you in a couple of years. We'll try to give you updates and maybe some live feeds or some virtual feeds in the interim.
Yes, definitely. Thanks, everyone.
See you at the after party. That'll start at 7.